Constantinople, 1512. A man steps onto the throne of the Ottoman Empire and inherits the most powerful military machine in the known world. He has 8 years to live. In those 8 years, he will double the size of his empire, defeat 2 of the greatest armies the medieval world ever produced, and walk into the holiest cities on earth as their new master. Rome spent a century building what Selim built in 8 years. But here is the part that breaks the logic. Selim didn't start with an army pointed outward. He started by destroying everything closest to him. His own family, his own court, his own father's legacy. And the question history never fully answers, was that destruction the price of greatness, or was it greatness itself? To understand how a man this violent built something this permanent, you need to understand what he was walking into before he ever drew a sword. Amasya, around 1470. Selim ibn Bayezid was not born into the center of power. He was born into its margins. Third son, distant posting. A prince in a system designed to produce only one survivor. The Ottoman succession had no rules of primogeniture, no clean line from father to eldest son. Instead, the empire ran on a brutal, unspoken contract. When the Sultan dies, his sons fight. The last one breathing takes the throne. Selim watched that system his entire childhood. He understood it the way a man understands a knife, not as a symbol, as a tool. His father, Bayezid II, was a cautious sultan, diplomatic, scholarly, slow. The empire under Bayezid had stopped expanding. And to the east, something new and dangerous was rising. The Safavid dynasty under Shah Ismail I, spreading Shia Islam through Iran and bleeding its influence deep into Anatolia like poison in water. Bayezid watched and waited. Selim had no patience for watching, because the stakes were not abstract. If the Safavid influence reached the heart of Anatolia, the Ottoman Empire would crack from the inside before any enemy ever reached its walls. If Selim failed to act, he would not just lose a war, he would lose the empire his grandfather Mehmed the Conqueror had bled to build. Imagine you are Selim in 1511. Your father is aging and indecisive. Your brothers are already maneuvering for the throne. And on your eastern border, an enemy is not attacking your army, he is attacking your people's faith. He seized the throne in 1512. His father stepped down. His brothers were already dead or running. Selim had the sword. Now he needed a direction. He pointed it east. He had no idea that east would only be the beginning. Shah Ismail I was not a man you underestimated and survived. He had built the Safavid state from a religious movement into a military power in under 2 decades. His cavalry, the Kizilbash, were not soldiers in the conventional sense. They were true believers. Men who rode into battle convinced their Shah was sacred, convinced that dying for him was a transaction with paradise. You cannot negotiate with that. You can only break it. Selim understood this with the clarity of someone who had spent his whole life studying how power actually works, not how people pretend it works. He moved his army east in 1514. Hundreds of thousands of men. Artillery trains pulled through mountain passes in eastern Anatolia, the iron wheels grinding against stone, the sound carrying across valleys for miles in every direction. The Safavids had something the Ottomans didn't: speed, mobility, and terrain knowledge. But Selim had something Shah Ismail had never faced at scale: gunpowder. The Ottoman army carried cannons and firearms in numbers that no Eastern force had encountered. The Kizilbash cavalry charged the way they always charged: fast, fearless, certain of God's protection. They rode into walls of fire. The Battle of Chaldiran, 1514, northwest of present-day Iran. It lasted hours. The Safavid cavalry broke. Shah Ismail himself barely escaped. His wives were captured. Selim entered Tabriz, the Safavid capital, and walked through its streets as its temporary master. He didn't stay. His generals urged him to push deeper, to finish the Safavids completely. Selim looked at his supply lines, his exhausted men, the oncoming winter, and made the decision that separated great commanders from reckless ones. He pulled back, but the message had been sent in a language no one could misread. The eastern flank was closed. Now Selim had two choices: return to Constantinople and consolidate what he had, or turn south toward an empire so wealthy, so ancient, so deeply embedded in the Islamic world that even Mehmed the Conqueror had never dared touch it. He turned south, and that decision would change everything. Before we continue, if you're enjoying this story, hit subscribe. It truly helps us bring you more content like this. Now, back to Selim. The Mamluk Sultanate had ruled Egypt, the Levant, and the Hejaz for over 2.5 centuries. They had stopped the Mongols. They had pushed the Crusaders into the sea. They were the guardians of Mecca and Medina, the most politically powerful religious title in the Sunni world. And by 1516, they were hollow. The discovery of the Cape of Good Hope had rerouted the world's trade. Ships that once passed through Mamluk-controlled ports now sailed around Africa entirely. The tax revenue that had funded Mamluk armies for generations was evaporating. Their Sultan, Kansu al-Ghauri, was 75 years old. Selim was 46. Northern Syria, August 24, 1516, the plain of Marj Dabik. The Mamluk army had assembled in battle formation, cavalry, infantry, the traditional structures of medieval Islamic warfare that had won against Crusaders and Mongols alike. But this was not the medieval world anymore. The Ottoman artillery opened fire. The sound hit the Mamluk cavalry before the projectiles did. Horses broke formation. Men who had never faced cannons at scale found themselves in a geometry of death they had no answer for. Sultan Kansu al-Ghauri was somewhere in the chaos when his heart gave out. Or a cannonball found him. The accounts disagree on the details. What they agree on, the Sultan of the Mamluks died on the field at Marj Dabik. His army disintegrated. Selim didn't pause. Aleppo fell. Damascus fell, Beirut, Gaza, Jerusalem, the entire Levant, land that had been contested, traded, bled over for 1,000 years, passed into Ottoman hands in a matter of weeks. But Selim wasn't finished, because Egypt still stood. And as long as Egypt stood, the Mamluks had a base, a treasury, and a reason to attempt a return. January 22nd, 1517, the plain of Ridaniya near Cairo. The new Mamluk Sultan, Tuman Bey, had prepared a defensive line. He had positioned his artillery to face the direction he expected Selim to attack from. Selim attacked from the other direction. Tuman Bey's cannons were pointing at an army that wasn't there. The Ottoman forces flanked, then collapsed the center. The battle was over before its full weight was felt. Selim looked up and said, walking through the aftermath, "This is what happens when God removes his hand from a people who stopped deserving it." Cairo fell. The Mamluk Sultanate, 267 years old, ceased to exist on a January morning in 1517. The territories Selim now controlled were not just land on a map. They were the architecture of the Islamic world itself. Syria, Palestine, Lebanon, all of Egypt, from the Mediterranean coast down to Aswan, the Nile Delta, the city that had been the cultural capital of the Arab world for centuries, the Hejaz, Mecca, Medina, Jeddah, the Red Sea ports, the roads that carried millions of pilgrims from across the known world every single year. In 8 years, the Ottoman Empire had expanded by approximately 70%. Some historians calculate it higher. The numbers stop meaning anything at a certain scale. What matters is what the expansion meant. The Ottoman Empire was no longer a regional Balkan and Anatolian power with imperial ambitions. It was now the center of gravity of the entire Muslim world. And Selim understood exactly what that meant, and exactly what he needed to do next. Here is the fact that changes the entire story. Selim didn't just conquer Egypt. He walked into Cairo and received something no Ottoman Sultan had ever held, something that couldn't be taken by force, only transferred by consent. The last Abbasid caliph was living in Cairo, a ceremonial shadow of a title that had existed since the 7th century, the spiritual successor to the Prophet's authority over the Sunni Muslim world. In the aftermath of Cairo's fall, that caliph stood before Selim. He transferred the banner, the sword, the relics of the Prophet, the Caliphate, the single most politically and spiritually loaded title in Islam, passed from the Abbasid line into Ottoman hands. Whether Selim sought this deliberately or accepted it as a consequence of conquest is a question historians still argue. But the effect was not arguable. Istanbul, a city that had been Christian Constantinople less than 70 years earlier, was now the capital of the Islamic Caliphate. The Sultan of the Ottomans was now the Caliph of Sunni Islam, custodian of the two holy mosques, protector of the Hajj routes, guardian of Mecca and Medina. Think about what that means for every Muslim ruler on earth who now had to navigate their relationship with the Ottoman throne. Not just a military superpower to the north, a religious obligation. Selim had not just conquered territory, he had conquered legitimacy itself. Because here is the hidden calculation that most people miss entirely. Military empires collapse when the army stops winning. But religious legitimacy, the kind that says your enemies are not just defeated, but spiritually in the wrong for opposing you, that outlasts armies. That outlasts dynasties. That outlasts the man who built it. Selim built both in 8 years, starting from a throne he took by dismantling his own family. And then, in the cruelest irony that history produces sometimes, he died. September 22nd, 1520, 8 years after taking the throne. Some accounts say plague. Some say a skin condition that had tormented him for years. He was approximately 50 years old. He had been planning his next campaign when his body stopped. His generals said he wept when he understood he would not see it through. Not from fear, from the specific grief of a man who can see exactly where he was going and knows he will not arrive. What Selim left behind was not just territory, it was a transformed world. His son, Suleiman, who history would call the Magnificent, inherited an empire so fundamentally different from what his grandfather had ruled that it required an entirely new strategic imagination to govern it. The Caliphate title stayed with Ottoman sultans for 4 more centuries until 1924, when the modern Turkish Republic abolished it entirely. 400 years of religious and political legitimacy built on 8 years of conquest. But here is the hidden fact that reframes everything. Selim the Grim, the man history had believed many conquests for over his life, the Glibberov of the Supportive memory. The man history of remembers as a cold, ruthless, iron sultan was a poet. He wrote in Turkish, Arabic, and Persian. He carried manuscripts on campaign the way other commanders carried extra swords. His soldiers called him Yavuz, the resolute, the stern, the uncompromising. But in his private writings, the voice is not a conqueror's voice. It is the voice of a man who understood exactly what he was costing the world to build what he was building, and paid the price anyway. Because the alternative was watching the Safavids fracture the Ottoman state from within, watching the Mamluks hold the heart of Islam as a weakening power that could not protect it. Selim looked at the board. He saw what was coming, and he moved first. Not out of ambition alone, out of a cold, clear calculation that the world needed a center of gravity, and he was going to be it. We started with a question that sounded like it was about conquest. How does a man double an empire in 8 years? But that was never really the question. The real question, the one this entire story was building toward, is this. What does it cost to be the person history needs at the exact moment history needs them? Selim paid with his family, with his father's peace, with the quiet life that every human being, somewhere underneath the ambition, actually wants. He was ruthless. The historical record does not allow a softer word. He executed rivals with efficiency and without visible remorse. He destroyed the Safavid army and the Mamluk Sultanate with the same cold precision a craftsman uses on resistant material. But he was also the man who looked at a fracturing Islamic world in 1512, threatened from the east by Safavid influence, weakened in the south by Mamluk decline, and made a decision no one before him had the capacity to make. He unified it, not through diplomacy, not through patience, through the only language the moment understood. Rome spent a century building what Selim built in 8 years, but Rome had centuries to spend. Selim didn't. And somehow, impossibly, he knew that. He died at 50, planning a campaign he would never fight, carrying a caliphate he had never asked for but accepted with both hands. And the structures he built, the territorial borders, the religious legitimacy, the Ottoman claim over the holiest cities on earth, lasted 400 years after him. The question was never whether Selim the Grim was great. The real question is darker than that. Is it possible to build something truly permanent without becoming the kind of person you would have feared when you were young? Selim never answered that question. He just kept building. But Selim wasn't unique in history. 3 years after his death, his son Suleiman inherited everything Selim built and faced a challenge his father never had to solve. How do you hold an empire built for conquest when there is nothing left to conquer? And the answer Suleiman found is stranger and darker than anything in this story.